December 26, 1900. The relief vessel Hesperus cuts through the North Atlantic swells, bound for the Flannan Isles, a jagged cluster of rocks nearly 20 miles off the coast of Scotland's outer Hebrides. On its deck, a small party of keepers and sailors brace against the icy spray. Their task is routine: bring supplies, rotate one of the resident lighthouse keepers, and make sure all is well on Eilean Mòr, the island crowned with a brand new lighthouse only a year old. But as the ship draws near, something feels wrong. The lighthouse should be shining like a beacon across the gray sea, yet its lamp is dark, cold, and lifeless. There should be a flag flying from the pole, but none flutters in the wind. The landing stage should be manned, keepers waving from the cliffs, but only seabirds circle in silence. The captain fires a flare. No answer. He blows the ship's whistle. Only the waves reply. The lighthouse stands mute, a stone tower rising above foam and rock, with no sign of its three guardians: Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. When the relief keeper, Joseph Moore, prepares to go ashore, a chill grips him. In all his years at sea, he has never approached a station so ominously still. Whatever waits inside the dark tower will mark the beginning of one of maritime history's most enduring mysteries: the night 3 men vanished from a lonely lighthouse and were never seen again. Relief keeper Joseph Moore is the first ashore. The sea is a cold iron sheet, the swell shouldering the boat against black rock. He climbs the wet steps, heart hammering, and reaches the compound gate. Closed. Up the path. The main door. Closed. Inside the entry and up the stairwell, the air smells of ore and stone. On the keeper's level he stops, beds unmade, the clock unwound, the place strangely paused in mid-routine. No voices answer his calls, no boots scuff the corridor. Only the wind hunts along the lantern gallery. Moore signals the ship, then returns with the second mate and a seaman to search room by room. In the service spaces, the lamps have been cleaned and refilled, ready for night duty that never came. On a peg hangs one full set of oilskins. The others are missing. The detail lands like a blow. At least one man went out without his storm gear. Whoever left last also left the light unattended, a breach of Northern Lighthouse Board rules, and never came back. The island search widens. On the east landing, everything is intact. But at the west landing, the relief crew find the sea's signature scrawled across the rock. A storage box high above the waterline busted open, its contents strewn. Iron railings bent. The tramway rails wrenched from their concrete. Even a multi-ton boulder shifted from its bed. Up on the cliff top, 60 meters above sea level, strips of turf have been torn back as if a clawed hand raked the edge. The violence looks recent, the kind of damage that makes you stare twice to believe it. Back at the lighthouse, Moore and 3 volunteers are left to keep the light burning, while Hesperus steams to Lewis with the news. The captain's telegram is grim and spare. A dreadful accident at the Flannans. Ducat, Marshall, and the occasional MacArthur gone. No sign of life on the island. The emptiness has a bureaucratic echo now. A report filed, a light kept, 3 names missing. And then there's the tableau that popular retellings refuse to let go. A meal left on the table, a chair overturned, the clock stopped. These details live on because of Wilfred Wilson Gibson's haunting 1912 ballad, Flannan Isles, which painted the relief party's dread with unforgettable images. A door ajar and an untouched meal and an overtoppled chair. But the official accounts, Moore's notes and Superintendent Robert Muirhead's later report, do not record a table set for dinner. The unwound clock is real. The untouched meal is most likely poetic license that hardened into fact over time. Part of the mystery's spell is this: legend and record locking antlers in the fog. By nightfall, the lighthouse burns again, its lamp a white eye turning over black water, tended by men who cannot stop glancing at empty doorways. The island has given them fragments: the silent rooms, the missing oilskins, the wrecked West Landing. Enough to suggest an urgent dash into a storm, not enough to tell why all three went or why none returned. Once the relief party steadies the lighthouse and sends word ashore, the island itself becomes a case file. Joseph Mòr and the men fan out along goat paths and heather, moving clockwise around Eilean Mòr. The eastern landing is calm, crane intact, ropes coiled, ironwork unbent. But the western landing, a cleft of black rock that takes the full punch of the Atlantic, tells a different story. They descend the zigzag stairs, slick with spray. Here, the clues start to speak. A storage box high above the usual spray line has been smashed open, its rope and tackle strewn about the ledge as if thrown by a violent hand. Sections of iron railings are twisted and bent, some bolts wrenched from their sockets. Short lengths of tramway rail along the landing have been shifted. A derrick/crane stanchion shows damage consistent with heavy surge. Seaweed clings in places well above where ordinary waves reach. Up on the grassy rim, dozens of meters above sea level, sods of turf are torn back, as though the sea reached up and scraped the cliff's lip. Back in the tower, the anomalies tighten into a timeline. The lamp has been cleaned and replenished, as if readied for a night that never came. The clock is unwound. 2 sets of oilskins are missing from their pegs. A third set hangs untouched. By rule, at least one keeper must remain inside at all times. Yet, these details suggest that all 3 men ended up outside, and that one of them, most say the occasional, Donald MacArthur, likely rushed out without his storm gear. The relief men compare notes with the routine they know by heart. In foul weather, the West Landing is the monster's mouth. If loose gear down there starts to go, rope chests, crates, hoists, it can become a lethal projectile and a catastrophic loss for the station. Standard practice: 2 men go down in oilskins to secure, 1 stays at the light. Only an escalation, a squall, a sudden surge, a shouted warning would explain a 3rd man bolting from the tower. As they scour the shoreline for footprints, fibers, anything, the sea answers with its old indifference. No hats, no boots, no bodies. Just the wrecked geometry of the landing and the echo of procedures turned inside out. When Hesperus returns with orders to hold the light and await the superintendent, the island has yielded its opening act. Inside, a station paused, lamp ready, clock stopped, 1 set of oilskins left behind. Outside, unmistakable storm damage concentrated at the West Landing, high enough to imply extraordinary seas. It isn't yet an explanation, but it is a shape, the outline of a sudden emergency that pulled the keepers from the safety of stone into the breath of the Atlantic, where a single wrong minute can erase 3 men without a trace. When Superintendent Robert Muirhead of the Northern Lighthouse Board, NLB, steps ashore on 29 December 1900, he already knows the keepers personally. He recruited them, worked beside them during installation, and trusted them with a new first-class light. His task now is brutal in its simplicity. Inspect the station, interrogate the rock, and decide what most likely happened. Inside the tower, Muirhead confirms what Joseph Mòr reported. The place is orderly, the lamp cleaned and charged, oil fountains full, pots and pans tidied. A station paused after the forenoon work of the Saturday, 15th December. The last entries formally written in the log go up to 13 December. Notes for 14-15 December. Barometer, thermometer, wind, and the time the light was extinguished on the morning of the 15th sit on the slate, awaiting transcription. Everything points to an ordinary morning and an extraordinary afternoon. Down at the west landing, the evidence speaks in bent iron and torn earth. Muirhead records that a wooden box holding mooring ropes, secured about 110 feet above sea level, has been smashed out of its niche, its contents strewn and tangled around the crane legs. Iron railings from the tramway terminus to the steps are displaced and twisted. A stone block weighing upward of 20 cwt, over a ton, has been wrenched from higher up and dumped on the concrete path. Even a life buoy tied to railings at that lofty height has been torn off by the force of water blasting through the railings. Whatever hit this landing was not a normal swell. It was an extraordinary sea. Clothing tells the next part of the story. Muirhead notes that Ducat was in sea boots and a waterproof, Marshall in sea boots and oilskins, the kit they wore when going down to the landings. Back in the lighthouse, one set of oilskins remained on its peg. Mòr had already observed that Donald MacArthur's ordinary coat hung inside, implying he may have rushed out in his shirt sleeves. In foul weather, procedure dictates 2 men out, 1 man in. Only a sudden escalation, a shout, a surge, a crisis with gear would credibly pull a 3rd man from the safety of stone. After weighing the evidence, inside order, outside devastation, work patterns, clothing, Muirhead offers the official conclusion. The 3 keepers likely went to the proximity of the west landing in the afternoon of 15th December to secure gear, notably the rope box and tackle, when an unexpectedly large roller came up, overtopped the ledges, and swept them away with resistless force. He dismisses blown away as less probable. With a westerly wind, anyone merely lifted by gusts would have been blown up island, not over, and could have thrown themselves flat. Water, not wind, wrote this disaster. Later retellings would embroider motives, some noting MacArthur's reputation as a brawler, imagining he bolted outside at a shout and the others followed. But such color belongs to secondary lore. Muirhead's report is careful and plain. Good men, good order, freak sea. In his final paragraphs, he even defends their character and efficiency. The board, he writes, has lost 2 of its most efficient keepers and a competent occasional. The Flannan mystery in the official record is tragic but explainable, a chain of sensible actions severed by a single monstrous wave. Legends of Flannan Isle often claim that the last log entries described terrible winds, the likes of which I have never seen, 1 man silent, another weeping, and on the next day all 3 praying in fear, closing with the ominous line, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." Yet, when historians examine the original records, the picture changes. Official Lighthouse files show that written entries ended on December 13th. Notes for the 14th and 15th, barometer readings, thermometer, wind, and the hour the light was extinguished on the morning of the 15th, were written only on the slate, awaiting transcription. The supposed praying in a storm entries never existed in the primary documents. Later analysis revealed that those haunting words were a later invention, embroidered to heighten the mystery. The Northern Lighthouse Board preserved 3 crucial pieces of documentation. The captain of the Hesperus telegraphed that a dreadful accident had occurred, noting the stopped clock and concluding that the men had likely been swept away by waves while trying to secure equipment. Relief keeper Joseph Mòr described the gate and outer door closed, the kitchen cold for many days. beds abandoned and the lamp cleaned and refilled. On the west landing, he found a rope box high above sea level smashed, railings bent, a boulder displaced, and MacArthur's coat still hanging inside. Evidence that one man had rushed out without protective gear. Superintendent Robert Muirhead's report in January 1901 concluded that the men went down to the west landing to secure gear when a massive roller surged up to 110 feet above sea level and swept them into the sea. So where did the now famous image of a meal left on the table and a chair overturned come from? In truth, mostly from Wilfred Wilson Gibson's 1912 ballad, Flannan Isles, a haunting poem that imagined the relief party's dread with unforgettable detail. Over time, its imagery became fused with fact. Mòr himself recorded that the kitchen was very clean, suggesting the men had already eaten and tidied up before leaving, quite different from the notion of a meal abandoned mid-bite. And what about the storm? Contemporary weather records for the outer Hebrides show no gales on December 12th, 14th. The story of the keepers praying in a hurricane is almost certainly myth-making. Yet some clues remain genuinely strange. The ship Arctur, passing the islands around midnight on the 15th, noted that the lighthouse was dark. That sighting suggests the disaster had already happened, consistent with the theory that the men were lost sometime during the afternoon of December 15th, after the light had been prepared but before it could be lit for the night. The damage on the west landing, far above the usual tide line, also reinforces the idea of an extraordinary wave rather than wind. In the end, the unusual clues divide into two categories. 1. Mythic additions. The log entries of prayer, the meal left on the table, the overturned chair, none of which appear in the official records, and most likely invented later. 2. Primary evidence. The prepared lamp, the stopped clock, one set of oilskins left behind, the high storm damage on the landing, all pointing toward a sudden emergency that pulled even the third man from safety. When we strip away the legends, what remains is colder, but no less eerie. A lighthouse in perfect order, the sea's violence etched into iron and stone, and a blank space where 3 men once stood. From this foundation, the speculation multiplies. Waves, madness, monsters, and mysteries. As the story of Flannan Isles continues to echo beyond its windswept rock. If Superintendent Muirhead's conclusion offered a sober explanation, the world quickly supplied more dramatic ones. The disappearance of 3 keepers on a lonely island invited every kind of theory, from practical to fantastical. The most plausible theory remains the one in the official report: a rogue wave. The Flannan Isles face the raw Atlantic. Freak seas can tower high above the ordinary surf. The twisted iron railings and smashed rope box on the west landing suggest the ocean reached far higher than expected. The men, intent on securing loose gear, may have underestimated its force. A single colossal surge could easily sweep all 3 into the deep without a trace. But other stories linger. Some whisper about madness from isolation. Lighthouse duty was monotonous, cut off from the world, and tempers could fray. Donald MacArthur, the occasional, had a reputation for a quick temper on shore. Did a quarrel erupt, perhaps violent, dragging the others into disaster? One dark version imagines MacArthur killing his colleagues, then himself falling or throwing himself into the sea. Yet no blood, no signs of struggle, no evidence inside the lighthouse ever supported this. More colorful still are the supernatural tales. In local folklore, the Flannans are a haunted place, stalked by giant seabirds or sea spirits. Some say enormous birds carried the men away. Others spin yarns of a sea serpent rising from the depths, snatching them from the rocks. A few even suggest they were stolen by spies or foreign raiders, spirited off to serve in secret. And then there is the idea of deliberate flight, that the men abandoned their posts to start new lives elsewhere. But this theory struggles against reality. All three were experienced keepers with families, and the island showed no signs of deliberate packing or escape. Psychological theories persist too. Scholars note the crushing solitude of such postings could fuel paranoia or hallucinations. Could all three have been driven by a sudden collective panic, chasing a phantom alarm outside into the storm? If so, the Atlantic sealed their fate with merciless speed. In the end, every theory adds to the legend rather than resolves it. A natural disaster fits the evidence best, yet the human mind rebels at such a simple ending. We prefer stories of betrayal, madness, monsters, or abduction. The Flannan Isle mystery has become a canvas onto which each generation paints its own fears. The fury of the sea, the fragility of sanity, or the pull of forces beyond understanding. The disappearance of the three Flannan Isle keepers slipped swiftly into legend. Within a decade, Wilfred Wilson Gibson's poem Flannan Isle, 1912, gave the event its most haunting imagery. A meal left untouched, a chair overturned, a station frozen mid-moment. Though these details were poetic invention, they captured the eerie stillness of the relief crew's discovery and cemented it in the public imagination. From then on, fact and folklore fused until the line between record and myth blurred like mist on the Atlantic. Writers, musicians, and filmmakers returned to the tale again and again. To seafarers, it was a warning about the ruthless power of rogue waves. To poets, it was a metaphor for human fragility in the face of nature. To audiences, it was a ghost story dressed in stone and storm. The 2018 film The Vanishing reimagined the men's fate as a tale of greed and paranoia, showing how adaptable the mystery is to whatever fear or moral lesson we wish to project. Yet despite the theories, despite the cultural retellings, one fact remains. No trace of Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, or Donald MacArthur was ever found. No bodies washed ashore, no personal effects drifted back. The official report concluded with the rogue wave, but the lack of closure ensured that darker, stranger explanations would always have room to grow. Today, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse is automated, its lantern no longer dependent on keepers' hands. The tower still stands, battered by the same Atlantic winds, its beams sweeping out across the sea. But for many, it is less a beacon than a symbol. A reminder of three men swallowed by silence, and a question that has endured for more than a century. And so the legacy endures, echoing in verse, in rumor, in the crash of waves on the West Landing. What really happened on that lonely rock in December 1900? The sea has not answered. Perhaps it never will.